Right, so, oh boy, things are blowing up royally in Starmer's Labour now as the Anonyvoter vote rigging scandal, which I'd said in a previous video would probably have wider reaching consequences than just vote rigging in one or two constituencies, since the system is used nationwide by the Labour Party. And whilst the police are now investigating what exactly has happened in relation to this matter in Croydon East, the Labour Party's marking of its own homework on this matter, exposed as a complete farce as that was, now two deselected left-wing Labour MPs have made their own accusations against Anonyvoter, blaming it, at least in part, for their deselections. And when there are so many examples of accusations against Starmer's regime of fixing election candidacies or accusations thereof in favour of his preferred candidates, this scandal has the potential to keep on growing and involve more and more former candidates. And if it is exposed that Anonyvoter is to blame for delivering preferred results to the Starmer regime, surely his operation will now be done for. Right, so Anonyvoter. I appreciate this story is still not getting a lot of mainstream coverage. However, the latest revelations have bizarrely come from the Tory graph, the Daily Telegraph, and my previous video was followed up by another mainstream media journalist looking into this as well from another paper. So I would expect some increase in coverage in this going forwards. But because we're not there yet, Anonyvoter, for those not familiar with it, and why would you be unless you've been in the Labour Party or are, is the Labour Party's online voting system. Members can vote anonymously, so avoids the need to be at a meeting in person, or avoids the awkwardness of voting publicly and avoiding internal upsets perhaps at a local level. The problem with it is that it appears to be at the centre of vote rigging because of that same anonymity. It's not obvious necessarily when votes have been rigged, but in Croydon East it had become public that vote rigging was happening. One parliamentary candidate there had been favoured with data other candidates hadn't had access to, and was able to take advantage of that. And Anonyvoter, at least in part, is being blamed for aiding in that. Data manipulation. And making matters worse is that the people who own the Anonyvoter system are themselves based in Croydon, one of whom was actually appointed by London Labour to oversee the investigation into the very vote rigging their system was allegedly part of, which was just ridiculous, as abundantly obvious. And his wife, a co-owner as I understand, is also a local Labour councillor and was running for the London Assembly, so that election has now been messed up by association. And making matters all the worse is that Anonyvoter was implemented early on in Starmer's leadership without tender, and nobody knows why that was. Its awarding of this contract even bypassed the Labour Party National Executive Committee, which all screams something dodgy is afoot, as I'm sure you can appreciate. The question of how this contract was awarded in which case then arises, and frankly we still don't know. However, there is a former local Croydon councillor who fell afoul of financial irregularities on Croydon Council, who is both friends of the Anonyvoter owners and also Croydon-based Labour Party General Secretary David Evans. Is there a link there to Anonyvoter? Is there a link there as to how Anonyvoter got implemented? Well, as I say, we do not know. But certainly the police investigation happening there now really ought to be asking those questions, I feel. I'll not delve into the specifics of the Croydon story any further here. I've covered it in another video. But having set the scene, and in the understanding that Anonyvoter is used nationwide by the Labour Party, it was perhaps just a matter of time before more accusations against Anonyvoter in light of this, where it has been used before, come to light, and two cases have come along at once, as it happens, and both from left-wing Labour MPs at that, who have been deselected ahead of the next general election. Now, I've covered both of these stories as well previously, along with several other instances where left-leaning Labour MPs or left-leaning candidates have appeared to have been discriminated against, where incumbent Labour MPs conveniently for Starmer, because they always seem to be on the left, have lost votes to stand again and have either been triggered, or where boundary changes that are affecting many constituencies have meant that two current Labour MPs have had to challenge for the same seat, the left-winger always seems to lose. In these two instances that have come up now, though, Anonyvoter was used in the selection votes, and one of them is already lawyering up over it. That individual is Sam Tarry, the still current MP for Ilford South, who was deselected back in 2022 in favour of Labour right favourite and West Streeting's mate Jazz Athwal. There were irregularities to do with that vote anyway. Things stank because there were accusations of tarry allies being turned away at the door. And when it came to the electronic voting system, Anonyvoter, it was alleged that there was at least one person signed up to vote that way who had passed away. And where the tarry camp were given a list of registered electors, the organisers, who apparently were caught embracing Athol after his win, how very impartial, refused to pony up the list of people who had actually cast a ballot. Now, irregularities have been consistently denied, yet this was the first Labour MP, sitting MP, to be deselected in such a manner since 2010, and he wasn't the last. Boundary changes have meant there have been forced contests, really, between Labour MPs whose seats are being abolished and merged in effect under the new changes, and therefore there have had to be contests between them to see who will remain the MP, and the other MP complaining of a non-voter having been involved in their loss is Welsh MP Beth, a member of the left-wing socialist campaign group, who lost her runoff against neighbouring right-winger Gerald Jones. This vote happened nearly a year ago now, last May, and was done under an accelerated timescale for which there was no reasoning, no basis for. It was voted through by the Welsh National Executive, despite the fact a general election at that point was very much not on the immediate horizon. The move was seen widely as a stitch-up against Beth for being a lefty, since much of the new constituency was the stomping ground of Jones, and it meant she had little to no opportunity to engage with people who would be her new constituents, to present herself and put forward what she had to offer. The truncated election period, as it became, was reduced to 16 days rather than the typical 28 days. Now, there were Labour figures who spoke out against that, notably the then Labour First Minister Mark Drakeford, but to no avail. There was also no time for in-person hustings as a result of this. The vote by Welsh NEC was tied and the chair decided not to cast his vote, so a vote for in-person hustings therefore fell. So it all stank a lot, but again, some of this voting was done via Anonyvoter, and Winter, like Tarry, is also speaking out, claiming that the use of this undemocratically ratified system, which is under police investigation in part, also means her lost election bid was an unsafe vote. Other left-wingers around the country have also been binned off in the same way as Winter has, so this has potentially even more far-reaching consequences for the Labour Party. Here's an excerpt from the Telegraph exclusive on the complaints made by Tarry and Winter, which, despite being a Tory-supporting paper in nature, as we know that paper is, and you can absolutely question their motivations in even covering this story, a damaging story for Labour as it is, I think they have actually done a fair job of this story on the suspicions surrounding use of Anonyvoter because of how it has impacted left-wingers in the party in particular. Since becoming Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer has widely been seen to have sidelined left-wing figures. His party is now facing allegations that information generated by the Anonyvoter system is being used at times to help get moderates selected as election candidates. In one selection, a moderate candidate won just 10% of the in-person vote, but 62% of the Anonyvoter online vote, according to a breakdown shared by local party figures. There is no suggestion the Anonyvoter system is inherently flawed or faulty, but the lack of transparency has raised concerns that it is open to abuse. Regional Labour figures running the online votes are able to see who has voted, a piece of information that will be critical to campaigns to turn out supporters in tight races. Independent tellers are not usually given access to monitor the Anonyvoter system during the votes, meaning there is no outside oversight of the live online voting process. So Anonyvoter might be a perfectly fair system. There might be nothing wrong with how it is constructed, how it was designed and built. But if so, why was it so shadily adopted? Was that done because some Labour figures knew it could be abused? There was no need to ever actually adopt Anonyvoter because other parties hold online votes as well in exactly the same manner, but they all use an independent company called Civica, which used to be called Electoral Reform Services, to facilitate this. So those votes are done completely independently with all the required checks and balances. So this underlines again the issue with adopting a model, a system, that is now subject to police investigation, because Labour were never under any pressure to do so. So why did they do it? This has all the potential to become a nationwide full-blown crisis for Labour on the verge of an election year. That massive internal vote rigging has not delivered what Labour members, but potentially just what a factional few are after. The purge of the left, with everything Starmer has done to drive the left away up until now, even Owen Jones having now gone. This is all very believable and therefore all the more damaging. There are calls for the Labour Party National Executive Committee to investigate this, and certainly, if I were them, I'd want to know how this system was implemented without their sign-off, for one. They're supposed to be Labour's highest level of authority outside a Labour annual conference. But for all we know, some of them are elected using this system too now, and for some of us who have looked at those NEC election results in recent years and wondered how, as a for instance, I know I've pondered this, how a serial failure to get elected onto the NEC during the Corbyn years, like Israel lobbyist Luke Akehurst, how he now repeatedly tops the NEC election results since then, has always raised an eyebrow on my part. Could this be happening at NEC level as well? In which case, how could you trust any investigation they might now carry out? Or given not all stitch-ups claiming are necessarily to do with Anonyvoter, the allegations stand, though the programme itself is not yet at least found to be inherently flawed. This is people abusing it, potentially, and doing what else besides? I think what is actually needed to restore any trust in what Labour are doing and how elections are being conducted internally is there needs to be a KC-led investigation, and the KC in question needs to be independently appointed. Accusations of anti-democratic stitch-ups under Starmer aren't new, but with the police now involved, a whole new level of scrutiny is being brought to bear on it, and it must be thorough. And members, current and former alike, must be wondering if their party has actually been stolen from them through vote fraud and vote rigging on a greater level than may have ever been thought possible previously. Meanwhile, if you'd like to learn more about the details of that police investigation in Croydon East, which has sparked these latest complaints and potential calls for legal action elsewhere in the country, you can get all of that on this video recommendation here. I think we're going to hear a lot more of this story rolling on going forwards, a nationwide system as it is after all. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.